Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a week that, I'll be honest, kind of gives me chills.
Oh, yeah.
The last 7 days before World War II.
Okay. Yeah, I see why you'd say chills. It's August of 1939.
Right. And our sources for this, it's like reading daily bulletins, pulling us right back there.
Day by day.
Day by day as the world just teeters on the edge. I mean, picture Europe just simmering, right? Hitler's Germany getting more and more audacious, and everyone's just kind of holding their breath, wondering if or when this powder keg is going to blow.
It's a fascinating thing to, look back on this period. It's like we're eavesdropping
Yeah.
on these major players in history. Hitler, Stalin, Chamberlain, Mussolini.
All of them.
Their choices, what they're thinking, how anxious they are.
And knowing what we know now, it really makes you wonder, could this war have been stopped? Was there anything at all that could have changed things in those final days?
Right.
So let's go back. Monday, August 21st, 1939.
Right.
What really jumps out at you from this day?
It's the day the world gets hit with, well, the unthinkable.
The Nazi-Soviet pact.
Nazi-Soviet pact. Imagine you wake up and the news is spreading that Hitler and Stalin,
Sworn enemies.
ideological enemies at each other's throats forever, are suddenly allies.
Wow.
Total seismic shift.
Changes the whole game.
In Germany, people are ecstatic, feeling invincible. But everywhere else, Japan, Italy, there's just shock and a whole lot of fear.
It's like, I don't know, a crazy twist in a spy movie. And on this same day, something else really got to me. The Admiral Graf Spee, the German pocket battleship, sets sail, heads for its war station off the coast of Brazil. What's that telling you?
It's telling you the diplomats might be running around panicking, but the war machine,
Already moving.
it's already moving, not just talk anymore.
And then we got Charlie Chaplin over in Hollywood, postpones the release of his movie The Dictator. It's a comedy, right? Satirizing Hitler.
Right.
But suddenly, reality is a little too close for comfort. Overreaction, or just the sign of the times.
You know, I think it's that anxiety in the air, everyone on edge. Even making fun of Hitler felt, I don't know, too soon, too dangerous.
Yeah.
It's that reminder that these events, they weren't just happening on paper, they were affecting everyone's lives. Art, fear, the whole world.
Okay, so the tension's ratcheting up. Tuesday, August 22nd. We get a peek inside the British government. Lord Halifax is kind of downplaying the Soviet pact. But Chamberlain, he doubles down on standing by Poland. Looking back now, who got it right? Or were they both missing something big?
Hindsight's always 20/20, right? At the time, things were incredibly complicated.
Oh, yeah.
Halifax might have underestimated just how important that pact was. And Chamberlain, maybe he was clinging to hope, anything to stop another war. But then, that same day, Hitler gives his Obersalzberg speech.
Uh-oh.
He lays it all out, not just invading Poland, but his plan to wipe out the Polish and Jewish people.
Chilling. That speech just lays bare the horror that's coming.
Yeah.
And so much of the world had no clue.
A hidden current, something terrible, underneath all the diplomacy.
And to add to that feeling that war is unavoidable, more reports come in. German U-boats being deployed. Each day, it's like another piece of evidence that this isn't just a bluff. This is it.
It's methodical.
Wednesday, August 23rd, and the tension just keeps climbing. The meeting between Hitler and the British ambassador, Neville Henderson, is tense.
Oh, yeah.
Hitler says he'd rather go to war now than wait a few years. What's with his behavior?
I think he's getting impatient, thinks he holds all the cards, can force everyone to do what he wants. There's a little detail in our sources. After Henderson leaves, Hitler jokes that Chamberlain won't last much longer after their talk.
Wow.
Brushing off a diplomat like that says a lot about how little he cared about peace.
He's playing a dangerous game.
Yeah.
And then, that same day, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is officially signed in Moscow. We know it wasn't just about not fighting each other. There were those secret clauses divvying up Eastern Europe.
Dividing the spoils before the fighting even starts.
And then, to top it all off, Albert Forster, a hardcore Nazi, is put in charge of Danzig. That's a pretty clear sign of what Hitler's got planned for the region.
Oh, yeah.
It's like every day, the pieces are falling into place. Thursday, August 24th, and the contrasts just get starker. Hitler's thrilled after talking to von Ribbentrop about the Soviet pact. But at the same time, the German people, they're getting hit with severe rationing. What's the deal with that?
It's the reality of preparing for war, even if you think you're going to win. 1 bar of soap a month, limited clothes, people waiting in lines for hours just to get the basics. War, even before it officially begins.
This is everything up.
Disrupts lives, makes things hard for everybody.
So while Hitler's celebrating, regular people are already feeling the pain. And then President Roosevelt sends messages to Hitler and the Polish president. He's begging for peace. How'd that go over?
So Mochiki, the Polish president, he accepts, says he's willing to talk to find a solution. But Hitler ignores the whole thing. Clear sign that he's going for it no matter what. And then you see reports of museums in London frantically packing up their most valuable art.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what's coming.
The whole world holding its breath.
Waiting for the storm to break.
It's palpable. Like you can just feel the dread in the air. This feeling of like urgency and impending doom. It's all over these sources.
It's like the calm before the storm, right? You know it's coming, but it's almost eerily quiet as everyone waits and wonders just how bad it's going to be.
It's the perfect way to put it. Okay, so Friday, August 25th, and Germany does something bold and honestly kind of scary. They cut off all communication with the outside world. What are they trying to do?
Control.
Control.
Control everything. The story, the news, making sure that anything coming out of Germany is exactly what they want people to hear. It's like closing the curtains, hiding what they're doing, makes the tension even worse, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. And behind those closed curtains, we get a peek into that famous Axis alliance. Hitler and Mussolini are writing letters back and forth. Hitler's talking about his plans, and Mussolini, he's not so sure. He's worried Italy isn't ready for war. What does this tell us?
It tells us that this alliance, this unbreakable bond they want everyone to believe in,
Maybe not so unbreakable.
there are cracks. Mussolini had his own ideas, his own timeline, and he wasn't totally in sync with Hitler's rush to war.
Fascinating. It reminds us that this wasn't just two giant blocks going head-to-head. It was individuals, each with their own goals, their own anxieties, like a high-stakes game of chess. And then, get this, Hitler offers Britain guarantees for their whole empire
Wow.
if they just stay out of the fight. Is he being sincere, or is this just another trick?
It's hard to tell, really. Maybe he thought he could pull it off, convince Britain to sit this one out.
Maybe.
But it could also be part of his plan, right? Divide his opponents, keep them guessing.
So the weekend's coming. The tension is almost unbearable. Saturday, August 26th, everyone's braced for impact. And then Hitler throws a curveball.
He calls off the invasion. For a moment, it seems like he got spooked. The news of that British-Polish alliance got to him. He realizes that attacking Poland might mean a much bigger war.
So he hesitated.
It reminds us that even someone like Hitler, who seemed driven by this absolute unshakable belief, he could still calculate, he could react.
It's almost a glimmer of hope, right?
Ooh.
But it doesn't last.
Yeah.
Our sources talk about a flurry of activity, messages flying back and forth, unofficial mediators trying to find some kind of peaceful solution. Was there any chance of that? Or was war already a done deal?
That's the big question, isn't it? Were there real chances for peace? Or were they all just illusions?
It's fascinating and so frustrating to think about what might have been. But while everyone's scrambling for a solution, Hitler goes back to his old tricks, stages a false flag attack on the Polish border.
You mean making it look like Poland attacked first?
Exactly. Classic move from the dictator's playbook.
Mm-hmm.
Create a crisis to justify what you want to do anyway. Manipulate people, play the victim. But even with this darkness looming, there are these incredible stories of defiance. You mentioned the Polish football team, right? They won a historic match on the eve of war. The last game, they called it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just, I don't know, it gets to me.
poignant.
A reminder that even in the darkest times, life goes on. There's still joy, connection, all amidst the chaos.
Absolutely. It's what makes these sources so powerful. They show us the big picture of history, the politics, the armies getting ready, but they also show us the human side, the small stories, the individual experiences that get lost in the grand narrative.
And we're down to the wire now. Sunday, August 27th, the final countdown. What stands out to you from this day?
Well, we've got this late-night meeting, Hitler, Goering, and this Swedish mediator, Birger Dalaris. He's been flying between London and Berlin, desperate to find some middle ground.
A last-ditch effort.
Our sources give us this vivid picture of Hitler. He's agitated, almost obsessed with building weapons. U-boats, airplanes. It feels like, at this point, in his head, the war's already begun.
Even if it hasn't officially started yet.
Yeah.
And yet, the diplomatic efforts keep going right up until the very end.
Mm-hmm.
The British government sends their final response to Hitler's demands, but there's just no agreement.
No compromise.
They won't let Poland be taken over, and Hitler won't back down. Deadlock.
An impasse.
But here's what really gets me. As these messages are going back and forth, we get this detail. The German submarine, U-45, is commissioned into the Kriegsmarine.
So even as they're talking peace,
They're prepping for war. It's like two realities happening at the same time. Most people going about their lives, while behind the scenes, the wheels are already in motion.
It really is.
And I think that's something we all need to remember. History isn't just something that happened a long time ago. It's all these choices, all these actions and inactions that created the world we live in today.
It's a process.
And as we dig into these sources, we're not just reading about events. We're connecting with the human stories, the worries, the hopes, the tragedies of this week that changed everything.
We're absolutely right. We're not just watching from the sidelines. We're right there in it, discovering, understanding, reflecting. And as we reach the 0 hour, the moment the world changed forever, I think it's important to just stop and think about what it all means. The impact of these events, the ripples that are still felt today, is heavy stuff.
It really is. It makes you wonder, could World War II have been stopped? Were there moments during that week or even earlier where things could have gone a different way?
You know, historians have been debating that for decades. There's no easy answer.
So many what-ifs.
Exactly. What if the Allies had stood up to Hitler sooner? What if things had been different inside Germany? What if certain people had made different choices? It's impossible to know for sure what could have changed everything.
It's almost overwhelming to think about all the possibilities, all the roads not taken.
It is.
But that's why it's so crucial to look at these individual stories, these little windows into the lives of the people who lived through it. It reminds us that history isn't just gates and battles. It's the sum of all these human experiences, choices, sacrifices. Imagine what it was like to be in Berlin, Warsaw, London in those final days. What were they hoping for? What were they afraid of? What were their lives like as the world was about to fall apart? When we explore those personal stories, we really understand the human cost of war.
The ripple effects.
That go far beyond the battlefield. And that's what I hope everyone listening takes away from this deep dive. It's not just about retelling the story of how World War II began. It's about reflecting, feeling empathy, appreciating how complicated history really is. As you learn more about this period, look for those stories, those human voices that bring the past to life and teach us lessons for today.
It's beautifully put. Those voices remind us that we're not just watching history happen, we're part of making it. And if we learn from the past, understand the choices that got us here, maybe we can make better decisions, work towards a more peaceful future, and honor the sacrifices of those who came before us.
Thank you so much for guiding us through this week. It's been a tough journey, but an important one.
It really has. And for everyone listening, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deep into history. There's always more to learn, more to discover, more to connect with. It really does feel like the calm before the storm, doesn't it? Like, you know a hurricane is coming, but there's this eerie stillness as everyone waits and wonders just how bad it will be.
That's such a perfect analogy for the atmosphere we're talking about here. Okay, so Friday, August 25th, and Germany takes a step that's both calculated and chilling. They cut off all external communication. What's the strategy behind that move?
It's about control, isn't it? Controlling the narrative, preventing leaks, ensuring that any information coming out of Germany is carefully, curated to fit their agenda. It's like they're drawing a curtain over their actions, adding another layer to that mounting tension we've been talking about.
Yeah. And behind this curtain of secrecy, we get a fascinating glimpse into the Axis alliance. Our sources reveal a letter exchange between Hitler and Mussolini, where Hitler's laying out his plans, right? And Mussolini. He expresses some serious doubts about Italy's readiness for war. What's the significance of this exchange?
Well, I think it exposes a crack in this facade of this, seemingly unbreakable alliance. Remember, Mussolini had his own ambitions, his own timetable, and it seems he wasn't fully on board with Hitler's aggressive timeline.
So maybe not as unbreakable as they wanted everyone to believe.
Right. This exchange just highlights how complex everything was, the relationships, the motivations at play. It reminds us that these weren't just these monolithic blocks, but individuals with their own agendas, their own anxieties.
Like a high-stakes game of chess, right?
Exactly.
Each player making their moves, trying to anticipate the other's strategy, but ultimately playing for their own advantage. And then, in a move that almost defies logic, we see Hitler offering Britain guarantees for the British Empire if they just stay out of the conflict.
Yeah.
Is this genuine diplomacy? Or just another one of his manipulative tactics?
It's tough to say for sure. It's possible he truly believed he could secure British neutrality, right? But it's also very likely that this was just part of his strategy, to sow division, to keep his opponents guessing.
Either way, it's a fascinating example of Hitler's, constant maneuvering, always trying to shape the narrative, isolate his enemies.
He's always got an angle.
So we're hurtling towards the weekend now, and with each passing day, the tension is just, almost unbearable. Saturday, August 26th arrives, and just when the world braces for the inevitable, Hitler does something unexpected.
He suspends the invasion.
Yeah.
It seems like for a moment he gets spooked by the news of that British-Polish alliance. He realizes that starting a war with Poland might trigger a much wider European conflict.
So even Hitler, who seems so driven by ideology, by this absolute conviction,
Could still calculate risks.
and react to changing circumstances. It's almost a glimmer of hope, isn't it? But of course, it's fleeting.
It doesn't last, no.
Our sources describe just a flurry of diplomatic activity, back and forth messages, unofficial mediators trying to find any kind of peaceful solution. Was there any real chance at this point? Or was war already a done deal?
That's the question, isn't it? That hangs over this entire week. Were there actual, genuine opportunities for peace? Or were they all just illusions, mirages in the, desert of political maneuvering?
It's both fascinating and incredibly frustrating to ponder those what-ifs. But amidst these desperate attempts at diplomacy, we see Hitler resorting to one of his, darker tactics, staging a false flag operation on the Polish border to create a pretext for war.
The classic false flag, making it look like Poland attacked first.
Exactly. It's a classic move from the dictator's playbook, sadly. Manufacturing a crisis to justify aggression, manipulating public opinion, playing the victim. But even as this darkness is closing in, we still have these incredible stories of resilience and defiance. Like you mentioned earlier, the Polish football team achieving a historic victory on the eve of war. The last game, they called it.
Oh, right. Amazing.
It's such a poignant detail, isn't it? A reminder that even in the darkest of times, life goes on. Hope flickers. And people find these moments of joy and connection amidst the chaos.
I agree. And I think that's what makes these sources so powerful. They capture not just the big, sweeping events of history, the politics, the military stuff, but also the human stories, the individual experiences that often get lost, in the grand narrative.
Okay, we're down to the wire now. Sunday, August 27th, the final countdown. What stands out to you from this day?
Well, for me, it's this incredibly tense late-night meeting between Hitler, Goering, and that Swedish mediator, Birger Delaris. Remember, he'd been flying back and forth between London and Berlin, desperately trying to find some compromise between the British and German positions.
Right. Like a last-ditch effort to avoid disaster. So, what happened in the meeting?
Well, our sources paint a pretty vivid picture of Hitler's state of mind at this point. He's described as agitated, almost obsessive, fixated on building weapons, U-boats, airplanes, these instruments of destruction. It seems like at this point in his head, he was already at war, even though the official declaration hadn't been made yet.
Wow. It's like we're seeing the mask slip, right?
Right.
The facade of diplomacy crumbles, and we see the true face of the man who is about to unleash such unimaginable suffering on the world.
That's a powerful way to put it. And despite all the signs, the diplomatic efforts continue right up until the very end. The British government delivers its final response to Hitler's demands. But the gap is just too wide. They're not willing to sacrifice Poland's sovereignty, and Hitler's not willing to back down.
It's a stalemate.
A deadlock.
Yeah.
An impasse.
But here's what's truly striking to me. Even as these final messages are being exchanged, we have this chilling detail. The German submarine U-45 is commissioned into the Kriegsmarine.
It's almost surreal, isn't it? This parallel reality where, life's going on as normal for most people, but behind the scenes, the wheels of war are already in motion.
And I think that's one of the most important things for our listeners to grasp, right? History isn't just something that happened in the past. It's a process, a series of choices, actions, inactions that shape the world we live in today. And as we delve into these primary sources, we're not just reading about events, we're connecting with the human stories, the anxieties, the hopes, the tragedies that unfolded during this pivotal week in history.
Exactly. You've captured it perfectly. We're not just observers. We're participants in this journey of discovery, understanding, reflection. And as we approach, the 0 hour, the moment the world changed forever, it's worth pausing to consider the weight of these events, the ripple effects that continue to shape our present.
It's almost hard to believe, after all this buildup, all these attempts to stop it, the world about to go to war, like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You know it's going to happen, but you can't do anything to stop it.
It's that inevitability, right, that makes it both fascinating and kind of haunting. We know how it ends, but we're still drawn to the details, the choices, the missed opportunities that led to such a catastrophe. And that's where these primary sources are so valuable. They force us to face just how complex history is, the mix of individual choices and those bigger forces that shape events.
So the big question that keeps coming up for me is, could World War II have been prevented? Were there moments during that week or even before where things could have gone differently?
Ugh, the million-dollar question. Historians have been wrestling with that for, well, forever. And there's no easy answer.
No.
Nope. So many what-ifs to consider. What if the Allies had been tougher on Hitler early on? What if things had been different inside Germany itself? What if a few key people had made different choices?
It's a lot to think about. All those potential turning points, all the roads not taken.
Exactly. And that's why I think it's so important to engage with those individual stories, those little glimpses into the lives of people living through this crazy time.
It makes it real.
It reminds us that history isn't just abstract, dates and battles. It's the total of all these human experiences, choices, sacrifices.
Right. Like imagine being someone in Berlin, Warsaw, or London in those final days. What were they hoping for? What were they scared of? What were their lives like as the world was about to explode? It's when we explore those personal narratives that we really grasp the human cost of conflict.
The ripple effects that extend way beyond the battlefields.
And that's what I'm hoping our listeners take away from this deep dive. It's not just about retelling the story of how World War II started. It's about prompting reflection, empathy, a deeper understanding of how complex history really is. So as you learn more about this period, keep looking for those stories, those human voices that illuminate the past and maybe even offer some lessons for today.
I love that. Those voices remind us that we're not just watching history happen, we're part of making it. And if we learn from the past, understand the choices that led us to where we are, maybe we can make better decisions, work for a more peaceful future, and honor the sacrifices of those who came before us.
Thank you so much for taking us through this week. It's been a tough journey, but a really important one.
The pleasure was all mine. And for everyone listening, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, keep diving deep. There's always more to learn, more to discover, and more to connect with.